Elon Musk pretends to be poor, a rich man laughs at him. The truth leaves him in ruins. The evening air was crisp, and the golden glow of the chandeliers inside Le Chateau d'Or, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, cast an inviting warmth through the grand glass windows. It was a place where the elite dined, where fortunes were discussed over bottles of rare wine, and where those without status were never welcomed. Tonight, however, an unusual guest was about to challenge the unspoken rules of this establishment. A man walked in, his clothes ragged, his shoes scuffed, and his hair unkempt. He looked out of place, the kind of person the restaurant staff was trained to dismiss before he even reached the hostess stand. Heads turned. Conversations stilled. Some diners leaned in to whisper to their companions, their perfectly groomed brows arching in amusement. A waiter, dressed in an immaculate black and white uniform, approached swiftly, his face carefully neutral but his body language dripping with disdain. "Sir, I think you may be lost," he said, his tone polite but patronizing. The man smiled, a small, knowing smirk, but said nothing. Instead, he walked past the waiter and made his way toward a table near the center of the restaurant, drawing even more attention. He moved with a quiet confidence, unbothered by the stares and hushed remarks being exchanged around him. But one man, in particular, found the sight hilarious. Gregory Lancaster, a well-known millionaire in the financial world, sat at the most coveted table in the restaurant, surrounded by business associates. His suit alone cost more than what most people made in a month, and the Rolex on his wrist gleamed under the dimmed chandelier lights. At first, he simply observed the situation with mild amusement, watching as the stranger, this poor man who had somehow wandered into his world, boldly took a seat at a vacant table. But as the man picked up the menu as if he actually planned to order, Gregory could no longer contain his laughter. A loud, mocking chuckle erupted from his throat, drawing even more attention. His companions smirked, entertained by the spectacle. Gregory leaned back in his chair, his voice dripping with mockery. Well, this is new. Have they started letting in the charity cases now?" A ripple of laughter followed. The stranger said nothing, merely flipping the menu as if he hadn't heard. Gregory found this even funnier. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Tell me, friend, did you stumble in here thinking they serve free meals? Because I hate to break it to you, but this place isn't for people like you." The waiter returned, now visibly uncomfortable. He was caught between Gregory, one of the restaurant's most valuable clients, and the unwanted guest sitting at the table as if he belonged there. "Sir," the waiter addressed the stranger, lowering his voice. "I must ask you to leave. This establishment has a very strict dress code." The stranger finally looked up, his expression calm. "Oh, and what exactly is the dress code?" The waiter hesitated. "Well, this," he gestured vaguely at the stranger's worn-out clothes, "isn't it?" Gregory smirked, enjoying the scene. He loved putting people in their place, and this was the perfect opportunity to do just that. "Listen, pal," Gregory said, waving a hand dismissively. "I appreciate a good joke, but let's not waste everyone's time. This is a place for real wealth, not for—" He gave the stranger a pointed once-over, "whatever you are." More chuckles from his table. The stranger, however, remained unshaken. He tilted his head slightly as if studying Gregory, before setting the menu down and clasping his hands together. "And what exactly makes a place like this for people like you?" Gregory snorted. "You wouldn't get it? Try me," the stranger said, his voice smooth, controlled. The businessman scoffed, leaning forward. "Fine. Money, power, status. The people in this room didn't get here by accident. They earned their place through success, through wealth, through being important." The stranger nodded, as if considering this. "I see. So, in your mind, a person's value is measured by how much they own." Gregory grinned, pleased with himself. "Obviously." The stranger's lips quirked slightly. "And if I told you I have more money than you?" The entire table burst into laughter. Even the nearby diners who had been eavesdropping joined in, unable to contain their amusement. Gregory wiped an imaginary tear from his eye. "That's rich, no pun intended. But seriously, you don't belong here. So why don't you do us all a favor and get out before you embarrass yourself further?" The waiter, sensing an escalation, tried once more. "Sir, if you do not leave willingly, I'll have to call security." The stranger sighed, almost as if he had expected all of this. He reached into his pocket, and for a moment, Gregory thought he was about to pull out some crumpled bills in a pathetic attempt to prove he could afford a meal. But instead, the stranger pulled out a sleek, black metal card. The waiter's eyes widened. The table went silent. Even Gregory stopped laughing. The stranger held it up between two fingers, the silver letters gleaming under the chandelier's light. It was a centurion card. The kind of card only the world's most elite billionaires had. The kind of card Gregory himself had applied for, only to be rejected. A slow, creeping realization began to dawn on everyone at the table. Gregory's smirk wavered. The stranger tapped the card against the table. "Would you like to swipe this first, or shall we continue the part where you assume you're wealthier than me?" Silence. Then, a low murmur spread through the restaurant as more and more people recognized the card, whispering to one another. Speculation. Confusion. Gregory, suddenly uneasy, narrowed his eyes. Who are you?" The stranger leaned forward slightly, finally revealing the full force of his gaze. A gaze Gregory recognized. A gaze the entire world recognized. A slow smirk curled on the stranger's lips. "Elon Musk," he said simply. The blood drained from Gregory's face. A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. Someone dropped their glass. A woman near the bar covered her mouth in shock. The waiter took a full step back, his face pale. Elon Musk. The billionaire. The genius. The man who owned entire industries. The man Gregory had just mocked and humiliated. Elon Musk leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed. "And as it turns out," he continued, his voice dripping with amusement, "I happen to own a considerable stake in this restaurant. So I suppose by your logic, that means..." He gestured around, a mocking glint in his eye. "I do belong here. And you? Well, that's another story." Gregory looked like he was going to throw up. Gregory's face turned ashen, his once smug expression replaced with sheer panic. The room was dead silent, the weight of Elon Musk's words sinking into the stunned crowd like a heavy stone. Elon. The wealthiest man in the world. The very same man Gregory had spent the last 10 minutes mocking. A slow murmur spread through the restaurant, people whispering in hushed, disbelieving tones. Some diners subtly pulled out their phones, snapping photos and recording videos, their eyes darting between Elon and the now terrified Gregory. The businessman's throat went dry. He tried to salvage the moment, letting out a forced chuckle. "Why, you're joking, right?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying his nerves. Elon tilted his head, his smirk never fading. "I don't joke about money." Gregory's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. The confidence he had oozed just moments ago had vanished, replaced with something Elon had seen in the eyes of countless arrogant men before him. Elon picked up his black metal centurion card again, tapping it against the table. "Tell me, Gregory." He let the name roll off his tongue deliberately, watching as the businessman flinched at the sound. "How's your company doing these days?" Gregory's fingers twitched. Elon turned to the stunned waiter, who now looked like he wanted to disappear. "I assume you have Wi-Fi here?" The waiter nodded frantically. "Great," Elon said, pulling out his phone. He tapped a few times on the screen, browsing something casually, as if the entire restaurant wasn't holding its collective breath. Gregory shifted in his chair, his nerves unraveling. "Listen, Mr. Musk, this has all just been a huge misunderstanding. I didn't recognize you and Elon's voice cut through Gregory's panicked rambling. He looked up from his phone, eyes glinting with amusement. "Lancaster Holdings. That's your company, right?" Gregory froze. The blood drained completely from his face. "Why," he stammered. Elon hummed thoughtfully, scrolling through what was very clearly financial data. "Oh dear," he murmured, almost to himself. "Not a great quarter for you, is it?" Gregory's jaw clenched. Stocks down nearly 30% in the last year," Elon continued. "Missed projections in Q3. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "You've got some rather unfortunate debt accumulating." "That's tough." The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence. Gregory's fingers gripped the edge of the table. I don't see why that's relevant. Elon's smirk widened. Oh, it's very relevant. He tapped one last time on his phone, then held it up for Gregory to see. A single transaction. A buyout offer. An aggressive one. One that would allow Elon to completely absorb Lancaster Holdings, effectively making Gregory nothing more than a former CEO scrambling to explain himself. Gregory's breath hitched. Why you wouldn't? Elon arched a brow. Wouldn't I? Gregory's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His hands trembled. The entire restaurant was watching him unravel. Elon set his phone down. Of course, he said smoothly, I could always reconsider. Depending on how the rest of this evening plays out. Gregory understood exactly what that meant. His mind raced. His pride screamed at him to hold his ground. But pride wouldn't save him from financial ruin. So, with every ounce of humiliation tightening around his throat like a noose, Gregory forced himself to do something he had never done before. He backed down. I apologize, he choked out. The words felt like poison on his tongue. Elon simply leaned back in his chair, satisfied. For what? Gregory clenched his fists under the table. For my behavior. Elon lifted his glass of water and took a slow sip, letting Gregory's humiliation linger in the air for another excruciating moment before setting it down. Good, he said finally. Now, since I own a stake in this place, I think I'll order something. He turned to the still terrified waiter, who snapped to attention. I'll have the Wagyu steak, medium rare, and a bottle of your best wine. The waiter nodded frantically, grateful to have something to do. Of course, sir. Right away. As the waiter scurried off, Gregory sat there, staring at his plate, humiliated beyond belief. And the worst part? Everyone had seen it. His business associates, the wealthy guests, the staff, his reputation, his power, his entire image of being untouchable had just been shattered in a matter of minutes. And Elon Musk had been the one to do it. Gregory's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. The humiliation had settled in now, thick and suffocating, but he knew that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the realization, the absolute, gut-wrenching certainty that his entire life could be unraveled with the press of a button. And the man sitting across from him, the man he had laughed at, mocked, ridiculed, held all the power. Gregory's business associates, the ones who had once hung onto his every word, now sat uncomfortably silent, avoiding eye contact. The restaurant staff, who had been so quick to dismiss Elon, now hovered nervously nearby, unsure how to recover from their colossal mistake. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Gregory's confidence was gone. His arrogance replaced by pure, unfiltered panic. Elon, meanwhile, remained completely unbothered, swirling his glass of wine with the same ease as if this were just another ordinary dinner. Gregory finally found his voice, though it was much weaker now. Mr. Musk, he stammered, surely there's no reason for us to be at odds here. Elon raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of his wine before setting the glass down with a quiet clink. At odds, he repeated, tilting his head slightly. I wasn't aware we were at odds, Gregory. Gregory swallowed hard. He knew a power play when he saw one. He had used them himself for years. But never had he been on the receiving end like this. I was mistaken, Gregory admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Each word was a dagger to his ego. I didn't realize who you were. If I had, I would have never. Elon leaned back, a lazy smirk playing at his lips. Oh, I don't doubt that for a second. Gregory flinched. The guests in the restaurant watched in complete silence, mesmerized by the unraveling of a man who had once carried himself as untouchable. Elon continued, his voice calm but deadly. But see, Gregory, that's the problem, isn't it? It's not that you regret your words, you regret that you chose the wrong person to belittle. Gregory had no rebuttal. He had been exposed, laid bare in front of everyone. Elon picked up his phone again, casually tapping the screen. Gregory's stomach dropped as he saw that same buyout transaction still open. A single press and his company would be swallowed whole. He felt trapped, suffocated. Gregory leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice in desperation. "Mr. Musk," he said hurriedly, "there's no need for hostility. We can make amends. I can make this right." Elon exhaled through his nose, amused. "Oh, and how do you plan to do that?" Gregory scrambled, his mind racing. "A partnership. An investment opportunity. If you acquire Lancaster Holdings, you'll be seen as my business ally, rather than..." Elon let out a short, amused laugh. "Rather than the man who destroyed you?" Gregory paled. I didn't mean..." "But that's what this is about, isn't it?" Elon continued, setting his phone down. "Your reputation. Your ego. You don't care about partnerships. You don't care about amends. You care about saving face." Gregory's silence was answer enough. Elon picked up his fork, slicing a perfect bite of steak before bringing it to his lips. He chewed thoughtfully, letting the moments stretch out, making Gregory sweat. Then, after a long pause, Elon set his fork down and looked directly into Gregory's eyes. "I don't do business with people like you." Gregory's breath caught. Elon's voice remained smooth, unwavering. "Powerful. I built my fortune by surrounding myself with innovators. People who think beyond themselves. People who don't measure worth by the size of a wallet, but by the size of their ideas." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make the moment personal. "And you, Gregory?" His smirk was razor-sharp. "You're just another entitled parasite who thinks money makes him important." Gregory's jaw tightened, his pride screaming at him to retaliate. But he knew there was nothing he could say. Elon sat back, lifting his phone again. "Now, let's talk about consequences." Gregory's heart pounded in his chest. "This morning, you had a thriving business," Elon mused, swiping through his phone. "Now? Well, that depends." He glanced at Gregory with mock sympathy. "Should I press this button, or should I let you walk out of here with what little dignity you have left?" Gregory panicked. He couldn't lose everything. He couldn't be reduced to nothing. "I'll do anything," Gregory blurted, his voice laced with desperation. Elon raised an eyebrow. "Anything?" Gregory nodded quickly. Yes, please." Elon chuckled, shaking his head. "See, Gregory, that's the funny thing about men like you." He tapped his temple. "You only learn humility when you're forced to." Gregory clenched his fists under the table, his humiliation reaching its peak. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but he was powerless. Elon let out a short sigh, locking his phone and placing it back on the table. "Lucky for you, I'm not in the mood to crush someone today." Gregory's eyes widened slightly. Was he being spared? Elon continued, "I won't buy your company today." But, his voice darkened slightly. "Let this be a lesson." Gregory nodded quickly, eager to escape this nightmare. "Why, yes, of course I..." Elon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because next time?" His voice dropped to a near whisper. "I won't be so forgiving." The weight of that sentence hit Gregory like a freight train. Elon gestured toward the door with his head. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to finish my dinner in peace." Gregory sat frozen for a moment before realizing what had just happened. He had just been dismissed. Humiliated. Powerless. Completely stripped of his authority. He had no choice but to stand and leave. The moment he pushed his chair back, the entire restaurant watched. He had walked in a king. He was walking out a broken man. The staff avoided his gaze. His business associates stayed seated, pretending not to know him. As Gregory turned, his cheeks burning with shame, he heard Elon call out one last time, his voice light, amused. "Oh, and Gregory?" Gregory halted, barely breathing. "Next time, be careful who you laugh at." A low chuckle followed. Gregory clenched his jaw, his face burning, and stormed out of the restaurant. As the doors swung shut behind him, Elon picked up his glass of wine, taking a slow, satisfied sip. The waiter, who had stood stiffly nearby, finally exhaled. "I don't know what to say, sir." Elon smirked. "Don't worry." He glanced toward the exit, where Gregory had just disappeared into the night. He got the message. The restaurant, once filled with mocking laughter, now buzzed with something else entirely. Respect. And just a little bit of fear. Because if tonight had proven anything, it was this. Elon Musk wasn't a man to be underestimated. As the doors of Le Chateau d'Or swung shut behind Gregory, the restaurant remained eerily silent, the weight of what had just transpired lingering like a thick fog. Conversations that once flowed with carefree arrogance had now been replaced by hushed whispers, stolen glances, and an unspoken realization: everything had changed. Elon Musk, the man they had mocked, dismissed, and underestimated, had completely dismantled one of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in the city. And he had done it without raising his voice, without breaking a sweat, without even standing up from his chair. The tension was palpable. No one wanted to be the first to speak. No one wanted to risk saying the wrong thing. At the far end of the restaurant, one of Gregory's former business associates shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had laughed just as loudly when Gregory had humiliated the so-called poor man. He had even joined in, making snide remarks of his own. And now? Now he was sweating bullets, his fingers gripping the edge of his wine glass as he prayed Elon wouldn't turn his gaze toward him next. The waiter, still stiff with nerves, hesitantly approached Elon's table. "Mr. Musk," he said, voice tight with unease, "your meal is on the house tonight. The restaurant would like to sincerely..." Elon lifted a hand, cutting him off. "No need," he said simply. "I can afford my own meal." The words weren't spoken with anger, but they might as well have been a slap to the face. Because the message was clear. Elon Musk had never needed their approval. He had never needed their charity. They were the ones who had needed him. The waiter swallowed, nodding quickly before scurrying away, eager to escape the crushing awkwardness of the moment. Elon, meanwhile, simply continued his meal, completely unbothered by the lingering stares. For him, this was over. But for Gregory Lancaster? This was just the beginning of his fall from grace. The aftermath. The very next morning, Gregory's nightmare began. News of the humiliating takedown spread like wildfire. By noon, multiple media outlets had picked up the story. A leaked video clip, taken by a discreet diner, was already going viral, millions of views and counting. Elon Musk exposes arrogant business tycoon in luxury restaurant. Billionaire humiliates greedy so. Watch his priceless reaction. Karma comes for the elite. How Elon Musk silenced a bully. Each headline was worse than the last. Gregory sat in his office, his hands trembling as he refreshed his phone, reading comment after comment, each one a fresh dagger to his pride. This guy thought he was on top of the world, and Elon took everything from him in 2 sentences. Imagine trying to flex on Elon Musk. Bro, what did you think was gonna happen? Faced with tears of joy. Let's be honest, people like Gregory are the reason the economy is broken. Entitled, power-hungry, and cruel. He deserved every second of it. Gregory clenched his jaw, his entire body shaking. This couldn't be happening. He had spent years building his empire, carefully crafting his public image as an untouchable mogul, a force in the financial world. And now? It had taken less than 24 hours for Elon Musk to reduce him to a joke. But the worst was yet to come. The business collapse. By the afternoon, the damage to his company was undeniable. Investors were pulling out. Shareholders were panicking. The company's stock price, already in a vulnerable state, began to plummet. At 2 p.m., a breaking news segment aired. In an unexpected turn of events, sources have confirmed that billionaire Elon Musk has officially cut all existing ties with Lancaster Holdings, leading to a major drop in stock value. Financial analysts predict a significant loss for the company in the coming days. Gregory felt like he was drowning. One moment, he had been on top of the world. The next, he was watching everything he had built crumble before his eyes. All because of one night. One mistake. One man. Elon hadn't even needed to buy out his company. He had simply walked away. And that alone had been enough to destroy him. The final blow. That evening, as Gregory sat in his now half-empty office, staring at his computer screen in defeat, his phone rang. He considered ignoring it, but something inside told him he couldn't afford to. With a deep breath, he picked up. "Hello." A cold, professional voice responded. "Gregory Lancaster?" He straightened. "Who is this?" "This is Harrison and Company," the voice said. "We've been reviewing recent financial developments, and due to the instability surrounding Lancaster Holdings, we're moving forward with the contract termination." Gregory's breath hitched. What? There was a pause. Then, the final nail in the coffin. "Your assets are being liquidated, Mr. Lancaster. Effective immediately." The phone slipped from Gregory's grasp, hitting the desk with a dull thud. His heart pounded. His hands went numb. His entire world was collapsing in real time. Everything he had worked for, gone. All because of one night. One ego-driven mistake. One man. As the world watched Gregory's empire crumble, Elon Musk sat in one of his sleek, minimalist offices, casually sipping his coffee as he scrolled through the latest news. His lips curled into a slight smirk. He hadn't needed to ruin Gregory Lancaster. Gregory had done that all by himself. Elon had simply handed him the mirror. And in the end, that had been more than enough. The lesson. The downfall of Gregory Lancaster became a cautionary tale, a reminder that wealth is not a shield against consequences. That arrogance, when left unchecked, will always lead to downfall. And most importantly, that you never know who you're speaking to. You never know who you're mocking, dismissing, belittling. Because the person you laugh at today might just be the one who holds your fate in their hands tomorrow. As Gregory sat alone in his now silent penthouse, staring at the city skyline that he no longer owned a piece of, he replayed that fateful night in his head. The laughter, the arrogance, the assumption that he was untouchable. He had been so sure that he was better, so sure that Elon Musk had been beneath him. And now, he was the one who had been left in ruins. All because he had laughed at the wrong man.